Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome. We're gonna get started shortly here. If folks are coming in, welcome. In a couple minutes, we'll get started. If anyone wants to let us know through the chat where they're coming from, we'd love to know. I am also gonna be muting folks so that we can make sure that the sound quality is the best it can be. Welcome to people who are just coming in. Does anyone know where I am? Anyone recognize this space?
Where are you? Where are you?
I'm at the Dance Palace. I'm in the boardroom. All right. So let's see. Josiah, I think that's how you're pronouncing your, I'm gonna assume. Josiah, welcome from Washington State. Cool.
Very
Josiah.
Josiah, welcome. All right, we're gonna give it maybe one more minute. If anyone else wants to share where they're coming from, we'd love to know. What about you, Carlos and Ernesto? Where are you coming from?
I'm coming from Stinson Beach,
Awesome.
California.
And I'm here in Inverness.
Nice, we've got a good representation here. Rosemary says they're coming from Fairfax. Welcome, Rosemary.
Cool.
All right. What do you think? Should we get started? Oh, let's see. Paula is coming from Lake Tahoe. Patricia from Sausalito. Annie from Berkeley and Inverness also. Welcome. And Enzo is down in LA today. Cool. Diana's from Novato. Welcome, folks. Awesome.
Sausalito.
Sausalito, awesome. Welcome. And then Yvette also says from Sausalito. Nice. Okay, so this is the last one. So Jim from Sisters, Oregon. Nice. So we're in several states here. Okay, I'm gonna get started here. So give me a sec to spotlight myself. I will be again muting folks just to make sure we get the best sound quality possible. It's not to be mean. All right. So, hello. All right, hi everyone. Welcome. My name is Laurel Ann Riley, and I'm here on behalf of the Dance Palace. I'm super excited to be here with you all this afternoon, and it's just really exciting that we finally found a date to make this happen. Carlos will speak more to that. But I'm just so excited to hear from this month's artist, multicultural and multimedia artist, Ernesto Sanchez. I will be monitoring the chat during the whole reception, and we will be holding questions till the end. So if we don't get to your question, just wait until the question and answer session. And if you have any questions, feel free to send me a message directly. And yeah. With that, I'm gonna pass it over to our lovely curator, Carlos Parada, who's joined by a mysterious person over here.
Oh, I'll introduce that guy. So good evening. Welcome to our Dance Palace Community Center Artist Reception. My name is Carlos Porrata. The Dance Palace Art Committee's mission is to provide opportunities for local artists that live or work in West Marin and encourages new artists to exhibit their work in our lobby gallery on a monthly basis. Due to the COVID pandemic, the community center closed its doors for a couple of years, and we went virtual, adapting to the use of Zoom presentations and relying on donations. Anybody that wants to donate, they're more than welcome. Today's presentation was supposed to occur about 6 months ago, and it was canceled at the last minute due to a blackout that affected West Marin. I remember how we were all going crazy between Laurel Ann and Ernesto and I communicating with each other, and actually the lights didn't come back until after the hour of the event was supposed to start. So we couldn't do it. Today we're finally doing it, and the response has been overwhelming. For the first time in the last 2 years, we're totally sold out. And Rich Clark, our new chair of the Dance Palace Art Committee, was not able to register. So here he is with me watching the presentation. Before I introduce our artist, I want to share with you that I personally have admired his work for years, from his ceremonies, mask dances, and sculptures, to the amazing work he does by annually providing an opportunity for all of us in the community to be absorbed in the celebration of the Dia de los Muertos, a time to get in touch with our ancestors, friends, and family members that have passed, but are with us, are part of us, always in our hearts, memories, and on this special day of celebration. Thank you on behalf of my family and I, Ernesto. So now let me tell you about our long-awaited Artist of the Month. Ernesto Sanchez's work is mixed media and multicultural, incorporating influences from his Southern California childhood, his Mexican-American upbringing, his artistic studies in Asia and Indonesia, and his many years performing, teaching, and collaborating with artists throughout the US, Latin America, Europe, and Asia. Ernesto has been living and making art in West Marin for over 5 decades, working with symbolism, myths, stories from ancient cultures. His art blends those into a new expression of old and new, East and West. His goal is to create pieces that act as portals for the spirit and vehicles for personal discovery. Please help me welcome Ernesto Sanchez.
Thank you. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you for those words. And you mentioned Day of the Dead, and I just wanted to mention we haven't really had a large Day of the Dead since 2019. We last couple of years, we put up a community altar in town, but this year we're going to have a procession on October 29th, a Saturday at 4 o'clock. You can meet in the field in front of my studio, and we'll procession to the altar that's now installed downtown Point Reyes, and we'll revitalize this particular event. So thank you. And thank you all for coming. Okay. We can start. The beginning of the program is in silence, so don't worry about if your audio went out. It's just part of the show.
I like that. It's powerful. Yeah, really powerful. What a view.
This first pic that you're seeing is of my grandparents and my aunts and uncles, taken almost 100 years ago in East LA. My mom is the baby sitting on my nana's knee. And who we become as people has so much to do with the family and the culture that they came from. And my grandfather, my mom's father, you see in the photograph there, he is from Spain. And my father's dad, and I'm sorry I don't have a picture of him, he is from Mexico. And so I'm a descendant of both the conquerors and the conquered. And this feeling of duality has played a major role in my life and my art. As a kid, I moved back and forth between the Latino world and the Anglo world. Ultimately, I didn't feel fully part of either. But let me get back to the picture here. My mom, she grew up, she married my dad, and she moved to San Diego to start a family. Now, San Diego, America's finest city, is a melting pot, a beach town, a military town, a border town. Tijuana is right next door. TJ is what we would call it. My family took many trips there where, once again, I moved between one world and a very different other world. In my family home, there was an altar with candles and sacred images, sacred pictures, and in the garage, there were surfboards. As a young teenager, I identified with the Pachucos, young Latino tough guys, and I wore khaki pants and Sir Guy shirts, and I greased my hair all back. But as time went on, I was won over by the Southern California beach culture, and I became a surfer. Growing up in San Diego is a central experience because everything was, the weather there is really fantastic. And everything was perfect until I got out of high school and realized how conservative the town was. This wasn't for me. I didn't fit in. What was really happening was during the 60s was up in San Francisco. So I moved to Northern California. I lived in Sebastopol and Woodacre and then settled in Bolinas in 1971. Here's a picture of my pop-up burrito stand in front of the old Bolinas bookstore, which is now a dentist office. I used my family recipe for making beans, a salsa, and a tall stack of homemade flour tortillas. Brought a little Mexican culture into town, and the burritos were a big hit. Check how much they were. They're 40 cents a piece. As much as these times were fun and wild, I was really without a direction, and I had not really discovered my passion until I met this man, Piero Resta. Piero was an Italian artist, an impresario, and in Bolinas, he had created a little band of street performers. We wore whiteface and we perform on the street or go into San Francisco and perform at large events. I didn't have much technique then, but I did have a nice costume. And once you paint your face white, you're able to do a lot of things. Piero often talked about energy and lifting the energy of the audience. I didn't understand much about it then, but as the years progressed, I certainly became more aware of the transformative powers of energy. At one point, 8 of us, we all packed into a pickup truck and headed off to Mexico to do street theater. In Mexico, we hooked up with a one-ring Mexican circus, Circus Kimba, and we performed it in small, little out-of-the-way Mexican towns. When we reached San Cristobal de las Casas down in the state of Chiapas, I met some French puppeteers, and I decided to stay with them and learn the art of puppetry. We had a nice little studio in San Cristobal, and I was making puppets, and I started making masks, and that became a passion that lasted to this day. While in Mexico, I realized I needed to return to the Bay Area and study and become more accomplished as a performer. From 1972 to 1977, my world was one of a performing artist. In the early days in San Francisco, I studied mime, commedia dell'arte, mask, and theater arts. I performed in various venues on the street, festivals, small theaters, at the Hookers Ball, and of course at the Renaissance and the Dickens Fair. San Francisco was a vibrant place to be, and the performing world in those days was rich with possibilities. Here's a picture of me with a suitcase of masks. I'd like you to point out this one mask, Laurel Ann, that shows up later in the dialogue, but notice it there. So this particular act, I would just walk on stage with a suitcase, open it up, there'd be different masks. I would put the masks on and tell a story. In my little studio in San Francisco, next slide, I continued to make masks and puppets. And here's one that I call Little Ernesto, Big Ernesto. Next slide. And here's another of Little Ernesto, Big Ernesto. The story of this particular piece is a little Ernesto could do things that I couldn't do. He could fly, he could jump real high, and he could sit in that little chair there. If I tried to sit in it, I would break it. In 1977, I traveled to Bali for the first time to study mask making and mask dance. There I met Ida Bagusa Noam, who eventually became one of Bali's most celebrated mask makers. Traveling to Bali in 1977 was a deep dive into another culture, another world, a place I'd never been to, a culture like Bali before, with its ceremonies and its daily offerings to a world of spirits. Masks as well as mask dance is really part of their culture. So I was very fortunate to find a teacher like Noam. He spoke very good English, and I studied with him every day. As well, I studied mask dance with a teacher named Jamaat. Noam would collaborate with me on different projects over the years, an East-West mask performance workshop, and later a new mask performance funded by Festival 2000 in San Francisco. A gnome taught me an enormous amount about masks. He told me that anyone could make a mask, but the true art was not in how the mask looked, but if it had spirit and character and emanated with emotional energy. Here's a mask I carved in Bali in 1977. It is of the Prime Minister. Notice the simplicity of this mask, the large eyes, the big cheeks, the mustache, the eyebrows. The Balinese paint their masks just one color and play with shadow and light. This mask is static in form, but it has the possibility of expressing a variety of emotions. A gnome talked about the energy of a mask. I wasn't really interested in that level of energy when I started performing. I just wanted to entertain people. But working with masks taught me that while masks may stimulate the intellect, ultimately they communicate more strongly to the subconscious in a way that is generally only happens when we dream. To see a mask dance is to witness energy transform. You can feel it. You can see the mask shift shape as I express different emotions. But in fact, the mask is static. It really never changes shape. But like in a dream, the mask does shift shape because you see the change expression. I find it so interesting, the power that masks have. When I returned from Bali, I continued my performing career, in which over the next 15 years had a lot of successes. I performed with Snake Theater and Nightfire Theater and Antenna Theater and did several tours through major cities and theater festivals in Europe. Was also sponsored by the State Department for several solo tours through Latin America. I even received the prestigious endowment for the Solo Arts, an NEA award, Solo Art Award, and that was in the early 90s. There was a point in my career where I'd finally absorbed the energetic teaching of Piero and Gnome. After 22 years of being a performing artist, I had reached a comfortable place performing and understood the essence of my passions. I was a mask maker and a mask dancer, and I learned that both forms involved working with transformative energies. For the mask maker, you are transforming various materials and elements into a mask, which will resonate with the presence of spirit and character. For the mask dancer, you're striving to transform something mysterious, the mask, into something tangible. As I said before, masks can stimulate the intellect of the viewer, but when the mask is being worn, and the danced in, it is communicating to the subconscious. This image is of a masked character, me, passing through the veils from one world into another. In 1993, I received a Japanese-American Friendship. Let me try that again. In 1993, I was awarded a Japanese-American Friendship Commission Fellowship. That's a grant, basically. The goal of the fellowship is to send mid-career artists to Japan to live for a year and to see how it would affect their art. It was actually the simplest grant that I ever applied for. It was one page with 3 questions, and I was very, very thrilled to get it. But similar to this image here of this person passing through the veils, I was about to pass through an unbelievable veil. For living in Japan, it changed my life and it changed my direction as an artist. As I said, living in Japan for a year, it changed my life. I could do anything I want and live anywhere I want, and I settled in Kyoto. Kyoto wasn't bombed during World War II, so it's full of temples and carvings that are thousands of years old. As a mask maker and a mask dancer, witnessing the ceremonies in the temples of Kyoto awakened something within me. These ceremonies were not performances per se, but they were rituals designed to have a powerful effect on the spiritual health of the viewers. Attending these, I realized there was much deeper purpose to mask work than just performing on stage for people's entertainment. This realization changed my life. After 22 years of working as a performing artist, I stopped performing and shifted my focus to the ceremonial and visual performing arts. I awakened to the fact that the highest form of my art would be to create works that would feed the health and spirit and well-being of the individual or the community. That was a big shift coming as a performer, and I wasn't expecting that when I landed in Japan. I had another revelation in Japan, which had a profound effect on my art. And next slide, please. In Kyoto, I constantly constantly when I would visit temples, I'd be looking at carvings that could possibly be 1,000 years old. Many of these works, they just had a presence and they had this energy that was so powerful. I really could feel the carver's intention. I wondered, what creative pool, what energetic force was this artist pulling from to create this carving? If this work is timeless, and when I look at these images and when I remember my time in Japan, the work was timeless, then the energetic source these artists tapped into was timeless as well. It was at this point I realized the essence of artistic spirit was not bound to the present, but existed freely through time. My desire to create art that would resonate with the heart and spirit meant that I would be drawing from the same creative pool that these artists were from thousands of years ago. That was an interesting realization, and it was very helpful because since then, I've never felt that I am creating art alone. I often call forth spirits or energies to assist me and guide me in creation of my pieces. I do that today in Point Reyes. One of the best examples I feel about my intention to create art that supports the health and well-being of the community is the Spirit House here in Bolinas. It sits in the center of town and it was installed after 9/11. This walk-in sculptural piece was meant to be an interactive altar where the community could gather and leave messages and notes about births, deaths, or things happening in town. You know, and Bolinas is like, Bolinas has a very, how shall I say, it has an interesting reputation. And if the town didn't like something, like if the town doesn't like something, it's not going to last very long. But the Spirit House, it was embraced and cared for by the community, and it's been that way for the last 20 years. The Spirit House is visited by many people every year, and even got a mention in a Jan Morris piece about Bolinas in the New York Times. And she wrote, and in quotes, "Not many communities of the Western world in our dawning age of uncertainty would erect a public focus so unabashedly mystic." She loved it. The power of ritual. When I returned from Japan and I had shifted my focus out of the visual arts into the ceremonial arts, I encountered, not so soon please, I encountered something that was very interesting. As my daughter, she hit her teenage years, she entered a very difficult period. And to help her process her feelings, we created a monthly ritual. And for every month on the full moon, we would go to the beach and there we would burn a moon sculpture and she would photo document the burning. These moon burnings merged art, ceremony, ritual, and healing intentions. Here are some photos from that year. We usually went to the channel in Bolinas to burn the moons and hopefully time it well so the full moon would rise right when the moon was being burned. I'd like to go into another piece about healing arts. It's a shapeshifter panel. The shapeshifter panel was made when I noticed a lot of young girls of my daughter's age struggling into early teenage years. And I thought there should be a place that they could go to that was full of sculptures and paintings and writings that they could relate to, and they could see that they weren't alone in their struggles, or they weren't alone in their moment of life, and they could see that people have gone through this before. So this is a great idea, I felt, to create like an space like this. This here panel is called the Shapeshifter panel because the woman holding the snake is shifting shape. She's shifting shape into a jaguar, and she's holding the snake that is a medium between this world and the underworld. And the faces at the base, they represent earth energy or stories emanating from the earth. And at the top, you have a moon. So there's this constant energy flow between heaven and earth. Next slide. And shapeshifters are very interesting. This is based on a Olmecs from 2,500 years ago. The interesting thing about shape-shifting is that every native culture in this hemisphere, from Alaska down to the tip of Tierra del Fuego, they all believed in shape-shifting. And it's a great metaphor that all of us have the potential to transform or change. Masks. When I shifted out of the performing arts into the visual arts, it affected how I sculpted masks. And previously I'd sculpted masks knowing that the dancer would dance with them. But when I got into the visual arts, suddenly I was sculpting the story of the mask on the mask. So this here is a shaman, and he is going into his mystical world with animal spirits and guides and beauty and flowers and chaos. Next slide. This is an Aztec warrior at the beach, gazing across the horizons. That piece is made of cast paper. This is another piece of a person, that's okay. This is another mask of a person that is going through a transformation. His face is somewhat dissolving and his energy is exploding in every which direction. You can't see it, but on the sides of his left cheek, on the side is a carving of a lizard, which is also a helpful guide for him on his journey. This piece is called Flying Through the Ethers. It's a face that is either being blown away by the elements, or it's arriving from the ethers and taking shape. But it has a lot of movement. It's made of a material called FGR 95, and it's hand painted. This is a snake goddess. This piece was actually used in performance. The dancers would hold on to the tail of the snake and interact with the face. This piece is a work in progress. It's finished now, but at the time, it's a mosaic. Those are iridized pieces of glass. It's very tricky to mosaic a piece that's not flat because of all the movement of the face. But that's this piece is I wanted to show something in work in progress. When I was living in Japan, I got a studio space of all things at a mannequin factory. And I wasn't working in the department where they sculpted the bodies or the torsos of people. I was working in the creative arts section of the place. So the organization was called Nanasai. And if you've ever been to Japan and have gone to the department stores, their displays are just incredible. They're art pieces into themselves. So it was really great to work there and to have studio space there. But it got me into going out of just sculpting the face into sculpting the bodies. So I work a lot with the feminine energy in my studio. I groom the energy in my studio to have a nice presence, a nice feeling, something supportive for me and supportive in a certain way for people that enter. So it's a safe place. It's a creative place. So here is a goddess, and next slide. Here's I call this a sea goddess because she is covered with beach shells that I had collected on the beach in Bolinas. Next slide. Here's an angel. This angel is called the Bleeding Heart Angel. Her body's like landscape. It's ripped and torn as the earth, a representation of the earth. She has a higher awareness and she's bleeding hearts that will fall down onto the earth and rejuvenate. Next slide. This is a larger piece. I work with models when I'm working on these pieces. They're not body cast. And I mentioned to the model that we have so many life-size angels. I'd like to do a smaller one. Well, this one grew into be 7 feet tall. At the base, you can see the lotus flower, and crawling up from the lotus is a lizard, which is also another symbol of the mediums between the two worlds, this world and the underworld. And there's crystals that are bursting out of the lotus, and the emergence of the goddess arises. Around her head is a lot of flames for higher consciousness, and she's holding in her left hand an egg for fertility. Next slide. When I started to lose vision in my right eye about 10 years ago, it was extremely frightening and unsettling experience. It threw me into a real state of fear and depression as I entered a new world of double and blurry vision. I stopped creating art as I visited eye doctors and underwent 3 surgeries to, in quotes, correct my vision. Although the surgeries were not 100% successful, the desire to create art was really strong, and I went back to sculpting. But what was interesting is when I went back to sculpting, everything I wanted to create focused on the eye. I began to create masks and iconic sculptures, but the eye was always in turmoil. I never defined if this process was a healing art process or a protective art process, but it felt good to express my emotions in this way. Because from not wanting to, I had crossed over into a visually impaired world and became a visual artist with a visual disability. This image was made of a book cover, and should I ever write about my vision loss. This next slide is a mandala. Next slide is a mandala. I created this piece as this was definitely a protective piece, and it had a story. A lot of my pieces, when I make them, I'm working from a visual place, an intuitive place, and the story of the piece often emerges during the creation or after. So I can, once the piece is finished, I can sit with it and listen to its stories and see what it wants to tell me. And it's really helpful in the art world, working within the healing art concept. So Lola, if you can move in, kind of go into the eyes, to the main eyes, kind of go closer, yes. You can see here that one eye is pretty much in turmoil. It's in pain. And okay, back up a little bit. So this piece to me, when it was finished, it had, here, hold that angle right there. It had a lot of presence and power for me. And it really symbolized that I was not a victim. I'm not a victim with vision loss. It's just a change of life. And I have a lot of other allies that I can't physically see, but they surround me at all times. And that's what all these panels, these eyes surrounding the face, that's what they represent. All the visual allies that I never knew existed until I entered this world. Okay, next slide. This is a concrete casting of a piece, and I just like the water drops because it's kind of like tears. And sometimes life can be very frightening, and in your quiet moments, you have a moment to shed a few tears. Next slide. Here's another piece where the eye has been affected, but this not only could be just a vision of pain, but it also could be a vision of miracles, where the eye is golden, with golden rays of light emanating from the eye. Next piece. Here's a detail of a piece. This is the heart, is obviously on fire, and the triangle that the heart is sitting on, mind, body, and spirit, is out of balance, and it's in pain and it's suffering because all the nails are crashed into it. I mean, these pieces might seem like it's dark, but it's actually a reflection on the possibility of the positive. Next slide. I don't see like this per se. It's really hard to describe what my vision is like, but I do see multiples, and I just like this photograph because it was a, how shall I say, a photo of the moment. I was working on a mirrored mosaic, and it was the mirrored mosaic was on the floor, and this piece was leaning against the wall. And I picked up my camera and I looked into the mirrored mosaic, and this is what the mirrors did, is they created this image. Next slide. Here's one eye taking flight once again. Okay, next. Here's just a multiple vision. This is a mirrored mosaic with many, many visions. I mean, many reflections. The thing about working with mirrors, there's a real metaphor for me, is when you look into a mirror, you get one image back. It's a normal vision, normal reflection. But when you look into a mirrored mosaic, you get many reflections and many images. And for me, that's a metaphor that reality has many possibilities. There's many possibilities to define what you see, because your perception defines your reality. Okay, next slide. Recent works. This face and the next couple of few faces, they're all from a series that I started in 2019 called The Spirits of the Underworld. These pieces are cast paper. What I do is sculpt in clay first, make a mold and then cast. And then once they're cast in paper, I paint them in different ways. Next slide. So the pieces are metaphoric. It's a journey, spirits of the inner world. It's not representational of any particular culture, of any particular stories from any particular culture. It's just my own interpretation of, if you were to venture into the underworld, you might encounter spirits like this. Some of them are frightening, or some of them are bleak, but they're all allies in one way or another. Next slide. This piece was sculpted right when COVID started. And I really wanted to capture that moment of total confusion, like what is going on? And one thing you can't see so much, can you go in close, please, into the eye? The eyes are with rhinestones, they all sparkle. When you see if you come to my studio and see my works, you'll notice that all the eyes are sparkling. And it's a metaphor for, does what you see sparkle? Next slide. Here's a concrete panel. Obviously, I've shifted far from just making masks and now sculpting panels like this. And all of them have stories. I must work with a story. It helps guide me. So the story on this piece is it's seeking higher awareness, higher knowledge. And you have mankind, humankind's knowledge in the book of an ancient text. Then you have nature, its knowledge, the snake crawling up the text. You have two people on the left and right that have reached a state of awareness, and you're seeing the back. You're seeing their backs, you're seeing what they were, you're not seeing what they're becoming. And they're all leading up to an all-seeing eye, this great state of awareness. Next slide. Here's a mirrored mosaic. It's really hard to capture mirrored mosaics on film, in pictures. When you see a mirrored mosaic, the slightest, if you move ever so slightly, everything jumps because the reflections all jump. And this piece is I don't know if you can notice that there's a pyramid kind of in the lower quadrant. And on the left, there is a plant growth. And for me, that represented Occidental mind that had arrived onto this hemisphere. And it was blocking the sunlight, creating darkness that was affecting the crops and the well-being of the people. So the people sent a snake to crawl across the sky, to reach the sun and kiss it, stimulate it, so it would become brighter and dissipate the darkness that had come across their land, and their crops could grow again. Next slide. This piece I sculpted in June of 2020. And if you recall, in June of 2020, we were being told that COVID has ended and you can all get together with your friends on July 4th because we beat this thing. So I wanted to capture that collective moment. I don't think there's ever been a moment in our lifetimes or anybody's lifetime where the whole world was affected by one thing, and the whole world had to make adjustments in their lives because of the pandemic. But to come out of that was also quite extraordinary, that the whole world would suddenly be seeing the light of day, and the whole world would be experiencing a new dawn. And so this, using the pre-Columbian iconography of the face coming out of the snake, represents rebirth and shedding the skin of the old. And all the eyes up in the corner, they represent all the new visions you might have, new possibilities, new things you could create. And the turtle down in the corner, it represents perseverance, that even if you have a new vision, may not may not be manifested overnight right away. So stick to it, slow as can be. And the bird up in the sky is peace on your journey, peace as you move forward. Next slide. The cross. I was raised Catholic, but honestly, when I got into the art, I didn't want to create anything that was representational of the church. But one day I just realized that the first 14 years of my life were deeply involved in the church. I had to go to church and confessions and First Communion and Holy Confirmation. And it was all in there. So I decided to make a cross. And this is the first cross I ever made. And it's covered with nails. And it has a heart right in the center. And this Coyote Shaman is a new piece that's being unveiled. I can't help myself. It's being unveiled on October 16th at my studio in 2 to 4 here in Point Reyes Station. What I found interesting about this piece is it took 7 weeks to make. And when I mentioned earlier that I called forth guides or spirits to help me, to lead me forward, this piece was really involved in that process. And it was interesting that sometimes I was totally out of my comfort zone. I was being given direction to do this or to do that. And I would look at the piece and go, I don't know if I have the inherent talent to do that, but I had to forge ahead because these guides were not letting me off the hook. And they just kept pushing me forward until I reached a point of the piece being completed. This here unveiling will include Claire Peaslee will be present. So a lot of you know her because she's local in town. Rose Chapman, who works at the Coyote, will be singing and playing her beautiful music that she's written. And I have a dear friend named Zayra who will come, and she's a wonderful poetess. And she'll be reciting some poems. And I'll do a little brief mass dance for the unveiling. And that's on October 16th, next 2 Sundays from now. Ceremonies are interesting because there's a lot of talk. You can talk about the power of art, the power of ritual, or the power of ceremony, but until you actually experience one, you actually physically experience one, this is when it really have the strongest effect. So doing individual ceremonies or large community ceremonies is really also part of my art. It's part of my work. Here I am at Stonehenge, doing a private ceremony, just me, and trying to avoid a lot of people, but I did travel with my masks, and whenever I can, I pull them out and communicate from the mask world. Next slide. Here's another image of a moon burning. This is what more of a community event, but that's me standing there in the shadow, and there's the fire burning, and you can see the Bolinas Ridge. It was such a fantastic place to work and do ceremonies. And you can see the fire is about to engulf the moon. Next slide. Here's another ceremony that was also on the beach in Bolinas. This was an eight person ceremony we did on the beach, on Brighton Beach. It was for a friend of ours who was being incarcerated for 10 years. So the title of the piece was called Passage for Sage. We performed it just one time. And Sage, it was like a rite of passage, but she was not being, it was not a rite of passage for someone entering the community. It was a rite of passage for someone that was being taken from the community. Next slide. Here's from the Day of the Dead of 2019. For many of you that have been to the Day of the Dead in Point Reyes, it's extraordinary how the event has grown. I remember when I first started working on Day of the Dead, and we had a procession. We walked down the sidewalk, maybe 10 of us, with a couple of skeletons that I had made. And over the years, it was just kept growing and becoming more beloved by the community and supported by the community. And here's a ceremonial moment. I'm dancing with AJ and some of his friends of the young boys skeletons. Whoever saw that, whoever was there that evening, I don't think will ever forget it. Next slide. Here's a picture of a mask performance, a little puppet show I'm doing for my grandson. I did this earlier this year in Fairfax. And the mask I'm wearing, if you remember at the earlier part of the show, I said, remember this mask? Because that same mask that has been hanging with me for 50 years, been through all these ups and downs and all these turns and curves that I've experienced in life as evolving as an artist. It comes to a point where I can still put this mask on and awaken joy and wonder in these children, which is quite extraordinary because you wonder, what are they receiving? Will this mask performance affect them and lighten their spirit and give them a passion of something that they had no idea? This, as I said, as I mentioned, this mask has been for 50 years, and this puppet show I've done for my daughter, who was leaning against the wall when she was young. I did it for my granddaughter, who's right behind standing behind my back there when she was younger. And now I'm doing it for my grandson when he's at a certain age. And I just want to say that the life cycle as an artist never seems to end, but it's always nice to come across these moments that show you that the essence of your art, the essence of your passion, and the essence of your life still has the presence and power to affect people and lift their spirits.
My, oh my. Yes, 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 yes. Well, I don't know what to say. Ernesto, that was delightful. That was really wonderful. I'm so happy that you were able to share 50
Thank
years
you.
of your life with us. It's incredible. I loved it. We can open it. I think, Laureline, you were going to actually check on some of the chat things, or maybe we can open it. I'm not sure how we want to go about it.
Yeah, so I just wanted to echo what Carlos said. Ernesto, it's just really moving to follow your journey in life and just take in all your creations, and thank you for sharing that. We're gonna shift into, like Carlos said, the question and answer session. If folks have questions, I'm sure you have lots of questions and comments. This is time for that. I see there's some questions popping up already. And just so folks know, I will be sharing all of your comments with Ernesto afterwards. I will not be saying them verbally, just so we can make sure that all the questions get answered. But just so you know, Ernesto will be seeing all your comments. So Andrea says, bravo, Ernesto. Can you talk more about the mural that you made at Airbnb?
Sure. Yeah, I didn't show the, I have a video of that mural at Airbnb. It was commissioned by them. That was in 2017 or 2018. I'm kind of forgetting right now. But it was interesting. This woman walked into my studio one Saturday morning and got intrigued. I was actually working on the mosaic for the phone stall in front of the pharmacy. And she saw me doing mirrored mosaic, and she asked if I would be interested in doing a piece in front of a theater. I said, sure. And she gave me her card, and the card didn't really make sense to me because her title was kind of obscure, like environmental transformational, overseer or something. But about 6 months later, I got an email from Airbnb asking if I would make a mural, to contact them. They wanted a mirrored mosaic. So we went around for 6 months trying to get the contract squared away. But once the contract was squared away, it was amazing. They gave me total freedom. They wanted a 20-foot by 3-foot mirrored mosaic, and that was their requirement. And at that point forward, I could do whatever I wanted. And it was really extraordinary to have that fall into my lap. It was a lot of fun to make that piece. If you go to my website, you can find the video of that particular piece. All stories have different sides. So that piece was installed in the summer of 2019. They moved like 2,000 workers into this building, and they had done such an incredible job transforming this office building into something spectacular. And about 6 months later, COVID hit, and they closed that facility down, and it has never been opened since. And they're not even going to reopen their offices. So I don't know what's going to happen to the mural. It's still, I went and saw it a few months ago. It was kind of sad to see it there in this empty, beautiful building, just, you know, glistening into the ethers, glistening into space. But yes, that was a really fun project, and I really totally enjoyed that.
Awesome. Thank you. We have another question here from Claire, and it says, regarding the piece about a new world emerging from the pandemic, what is the medium?
Yes, thank you. Everything I sculpt in clay first. And so a piece like that was sculpted in clay, and I make a latex mold for that. And then it's cast. That's a material that's not concrete per se, but it's like concrete. It's called Duracal, and it has a fibercloth backing. And I like that particular material because you can paint it. Concrete, I can use acid stains on concrete, or I can mix pigments into the casting of concrete, but painting concrete just doesn't feel right. But this material, it was, you can paint Duracal.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let me see, I'm scrolling up here. I see Jessia says, I would love to hear more about the masks and the magic and emotion. What was it? You called it ...
You know, the masks, it's interesting. Thank you, Josiah, for asking that question, because one of the things to keep this talk within a time limit, I cut out talking about teaching and emotional, what I would call emotional based movement, is I discovered that working with mask movement, when I got further into it, and I will mention also with masks, there's no end to what masks will teach you. There's no end to where they will lead you. They just go on forever. So look out if you become curious of masks and get into masks, because they'll stay with you and they'll be with you, and anywhere you want to go, they'll go there. And with masks, I discovered that this communication, this thing about communicating to the subconscious was very interesting, because you suddenly realize that we as Western culture are not familiar with masks. We're not familiar with mask performance, and we're not familiar with mask dance. And thus, when we see one, it's out of any context. We have no context of where to put it, where to place it. It's not folk art. It's just something different. And thus the body or the mind, when they see something that's so foreign and they can't place it, it's hard for the intellect to grasp. But the subconscious of the within the humans, the subconscious world is awakened. When they see a mask dance, it is definitely like something from the dream world. It's imagery, it's movement that communicates on a different level. And discovering that and realizing that got me into teaching emotional based movement. I got into what is the movement within the body, what impulses within the body are being awakened and by external. And what I mean is, like, if it's cold, how does the body move when it's cold? Or if you're extremely bored, how does the body move when you're extremely bored? And what do you do? And to tune into the impulses within the body, what areas of the body are those impulses coming from? You could say chakras. What chakra is being stimulated at that point? And translating that into movement has a certain communicative quality, where the eye can see something that's never seen before in this way, but it'll understand it. It's that intuitive understanding that has passed through generations. So it's timeless. And this is something else with the art I do. I feel the art I do is timeless. I'm working in a timeless form, and and that sense of timelessness, as I touched upon it a bit when I was talking about Japan, is what is the current that these artists are pulling from. And I definitely feel that working in the realm I do, that current creativity has existed throughout time. The impulse to work with mass, the impulse to create sacred art is just something that the pool, that creative pool, is no different today than it was thousands of years ago. I don't know, Jay, if that answered your question, but I'm happy to talk to you about that any old time.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, go for it, Carlos.
I'm just very interested in one particular question that I saw in the chat that I wanted to bring up because it really got my attention because I know that's how you work. And basically it was from Claire. She was saying regarding the new piece, Coyote Shaman, which you were guided to manifest. What was the origin of that process? How did it arise and take hold of you? What happened? Can you let us into your progress of what happened in that process?
Yes, sure. There's always a desire with anyone that works in the arts in any form or whatever field they work in. There's always a desire to push yourself to another level. There's always another level. And what is that level? And sometimes you can see it clearly and sometimes you can't. And as artists, you pretty much are dealing with vague, somewhat images, vague, somewhat impressions or something, but it's never quite defined. If it was so defined, you probably shouldn't follow it. But something that is just mysteriously taking shape or form. So for that particular piece, I was interested in the mandala. I saw some art, mandala art, and I thought, oh, I'd like to make a mandala, something that resonates in layers and levels that you kind of enter or is projecting out. So that was the impulse. The desert was also, the vastness of the desert was also part of the impulse. And the Coyote Shaman, the coyote, the trickster, and the shaman, the manifester, how do they work together? And do they work together? And are they the same? Are they the same? Is the shaman a coyote? Has coyote aspects? Does the coyote have shamanistic aspects? I just wanted to delve into the mystic realms and that one, the esoteric mystic, and see what would come up. And so within the studio, you just create your own ceremonies, you create your own rituals and how to move things forward. So within the studio, it was like I'd put on I'd go to Spotify and typed in shaman music, and see what came up. So I'd listen to this music, some beautiful chants, some things that weren't so inspiring, but it just had those tones, those sounds, and then started sculpting, like I sculpted 3 faces I can mention for the Coyote Shaman because I wasn't quite sure of the emotional intent. And since I was just diving into this realm, I thought I would sculpt 3 large faces and see which one would speak to me the most. And the sense of speaking to me the most is that's this interchange between my intuition and my impulse and something unknown. And the only guiding light I have at that point is if it rings true and if it's with harmony. And if something rings true, then I feel I'm on the right track. If it just doesn't feel right, then I know I didn't get it. And then, but harmony is also very important. Does the piece, is it harmonious with other components that you're working with? And you're creating a whole, trying to create a whole. So you have to work with that sense of harmony. Claire, does that answer?
Great.
Thank you.
Oh yeah.
For me.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just want to say, if you haven't seen the piece yet in person, definitely I'll ask you at the end, Ernesto, for the information again about how people can go to the unveiling. I haven't seen the finished one, but it was coming along when I saw it, and I'm really excited to check it out. Let's see here. I don't want to skip people in the questions. Nancy is saying, can you talk more about meeting up with the circus in Mexico?
Yes, it was very, very exciting. As I say, Mexico was an awakening because I when I jumped into the circus in here in the Bay Area in Bolinas. I really didn't have any techniques. I wasn't really a performer. I hadn't really worked in that world. So I basically put on a costume, painted the face white, and went out on the street and started doing stuff. And to reach Mexico, we toured down and we saw this Mexican circus. It was just incredible. This particular one-ring Mexican circus was it was dying. It was a dying life. This was in the early 70s. And when we hooked up with them, they were playing some town, and we asked if we could join them, and they said yes. And so we joined them. And it's just hard to describe this particular circus. It was one family with a few other people, grandparents, uncles and aunts. And it was like a gypsy family, but they weren't gypsies per se. The circus tent, when they erected the big top, it had gone through, I don't know, hurricanes or something, because basically the top just had seams. The seams still existed, and there was major holes in the canvas. So when you went in, and we would sleep in the center ring at night, and you could look up and see the stars through the top of the tent, the circus tent. They had one lion that, I don't know how they kept it alive. It couldn't stand up, but it cost I forget what it was, people had to pay to see this wild animal. The one interesting story that was kind of like a Bye Bye Brazil moment is that we set the circus tent up. We drove through town with big announcement announcing the circus that night in this little village in this township. And that night we were sitting there and no one showed up. No one from the community came. And we went, what happened? Where is everybody? And so they sent someone in town, and they found out that someone with a movie camera had shown up that night, and they were playing a movie against the big concrete wall. And that's where the community all was. They weren't interested in the circus that night. They were interested in the cinema. So that I found very metaphoric for this life, this circus life. But I did learn from the 11-year-old boy that was with the circus. He taught me how to juggle fire. And that was pretty cool. So it was just really, it was really quite an experience to hook up with them and travel with them a bit. That's my circus story.
Can you juggle fire on Zoom for us right now?
No, that was long ago.
Okay.
I cut my lip a few times learning that one.
Awesome. Well, shifting scenes, Mary has a question saying, tell us about how we got on the stage at the Polk Street Fair in San Francisco in the mid-70s. Magic in the making.
Oh my God. Yeah, that was, thank you, Mary. Yes, one night we were at my studio and everyone remembers the Castro for Halloween, Castro district, but before the Castro, the big scene in San Francisco was at the Polk Street. And Mary was at my house, and we said, let's go to Polk Street and join the festivities. So I grabbed a mask and a puppet I had made, and Mary grabbed a mask, and we went there and put the mask on. If you've been to any event, if you've ever gone to Castro Street during Halloween, you know how packed it is. It's just packed with people. There's hardly even move. You just kind of move with the crowd. But I don't know what it was about this particular puppet that I was wearing. I was a yellow mask and a yellowish puppet, but I still have today. And it was like the parting of the seas. When people saw us, they just parted. The crowd just parted as we walked down the street. It was extraordinary. And when there was a stage there announcing whatever, oh yeah, it was a contest of some sort, a costume contest. And they were telling us one person that was trying to get on, no, you can't get on because you have to be represented by a store. And then they saw us and they said, come on up. So we just had the most extraordinary time that night. And it was just extraordinary. It was the power of the mask and it was the power of the puppet that just parted those people. That was a long time ago. Thanks you, Mary, for bringing that memory up.
Man, I love these different pockets in time and place. Thank you. So just so folks know, we do have until 6:30 for this reception. If we're not feeling any more questions before that, we can stop before, but just so if folks know, we're not accidentally going over time. We do have extra time for questions today. Are you up for more questions, Ernesto? Also, feel free to
Sure.
let us know when you're done. Yeah.
I think I just want to talk a little bit about time, and not in the sense that you're talking about it, but just the sense of time, of timelessness. And it's really, I'm really moved by this concept of timelessness. I feel that true art is timeless. It's not bound by any particular era of art movement. It just exists, and it can exist. People can see it. Like I was seeing the sculptures in Japan, thousands of years old, and it would still move me today. And I just really like that vein of timelessness. And I think about it a lot. And I think it's a real foundation for my work and my life.
Thank you for that. And yeah, it's like probably trippy to be looking at a whole lifetime of work in a Zoom presentation in this time. Speaking of timelessness a little bit. Are you up for more questions, Ernesto?
Sure, a couple more would be fine.
Okay, you want to do 2 more?
Sure.
Okay, awesome. So there's a question that a couple people had. Mary Claire and Anne both had this question in separate words, but they were wondering about the burning of the moon ritual. And so Mary Claire said, can you talk a little bit more about the burning of the moon ritual? And is also curious about what was going on for you when you made the cross of nails with the heart. And then Anne was wondering, do you have time to say more about the way you used your art to help your granddaughter in her teen years? So I feel like those kind of go together.
Right. Well, it's you know, if you go back in time, at the earliest time, there was no art. There was just ceremonies. There was no theater. There was just ceremonies. And the ceremonies were made to communicate the mysterious other and physicalize it into this world. And the art was made simply to visualize the stories or the beliefs of the people. It was never made as art. People just made things to represent their beliefs. And so when you get into the world of ceremony or in the world of healing arts, you're touching upon this realm that is evoking mysterious forces that surround us. I mean, the biggest mystery of all is who are we and how did we get here? What is all this about? There's really no clear, true answer to that, but here we are. So we live with that undefined question our whole lives, and religion fills it in, answers a lot for people. There's different things that people have that they can hold on to, but it's still a mystery. So ceremonies evoke that mystery. They tap into that mystery. So a moon burning, as simple as it is, I mean, it's so alchemic. You're just burning, you're building you get the moon, you paint it, that's ceremonial somewhat. You put it up, you build a fire, and you light it, and you watch it burn. In its essence, that is very simple, but in its result is very profound, because your intention, what is your intention? And your intention was to help heal. And so it has this sacred, even though my daughter and I never talked about sacredness, it has this sacred element. It had this very intimate element because it was just her and I, oftentimes. It was very rewarding, ultimately, to do that particular thing. It was very satisfying when you leave a moon burning or leaving a ceremony like that. You're just filled with images, you're filled with impressions, and you're able to process it in your own time, in your own way. So in that way, it's like psychic food. It's a feast that you just took part in, except it's an energetic feast. It's not food per se, but it's another kind of food that feeds you and stimulates you. And ultimately, it keeps you grounded. because it satisfies that question. It satisfies questions that you probably don't touch upon too much. But in the sense of people that are going through an emotional turmoil or some kind of change, what can help ground them? What can help give them insights into their own inner? And so that's why that's how we were able to do that with my daughter. We did it for a year every full moon, and it became a very grounding process. And it's not like we went there in joy. I mean, there was, deep conversations that were happening before the burning, and then we go, okay, well, let's burn the moon. And it was just, the energy would just shift because we got into the ceremony or got into the ritual. So yeah, it was one of the it was really one of the nicest rest. It's really positive to do those things. Like even the Day of the Dead in Point Reyes touches upon this ceremonial aspect. That is, someone came up to me, excuse me, and told me that they felt this was the only high holiday that the community spent together. Then it wasn't inside of a church, it was just the community coming together. And I thought that was a pretty nice comment, because for her, that was her interpretation of what she experienced. That's what she felt. And that obviously meant something really meaningful for her in a very deep way. And so shifting out of the performing arts, when I was in Japan, witnessing the ceremonies that I saw at the temples in Kyoto that had been going on for hundreds of years, these ceremonies. And it was just really awakened the fact that feeding the health, evoking mystery, evoking beauty in this way is really, really powerful and has a real place in our society. Oh, the cross with the nails. Yeah, being raised Catholic is very interesting. Everyone has their own interpretation, but for me, it was tough. Listening to a lot of stuff. I mean, I was into it as a child, but as I got older, it was different, and I moved away from the church. I'm not anti-church. I just moved away from it because it wasn't for me. But when I got into making the cross, I really felt the nails were representational of all the pain and suffering I mean, all the times in history that have been based on religious wars and things, and the guilt that was instilled into me as a child through the teachings, that I really wanted to create something. I felt this cross worked for me.
Thank you so much. I kind of feel like that was 2 or 3 questions in one. Oh,
No.
I see someone's unmuted. Well, thank you so much, Ernesto. I usually don't share people's comments verbally, but there are like some words that I'm seeing come up a lot, and thought I'd share kind of words that are appearing in the chat. People have shared the word love, inspired, heartful, texture, emotions, remarkable, memorable, inclusion of community, a gift, magical, and awakening. And again, I'll share all the full messages from everyone with you after. I just wanted to kind of share that out. Do you want to say some last words before we pass it over to Carlos?
Well, I can say that it's been very, thank you very much at the very beginning to have invited me, both Carlos and Laurel Ann, to take part in this. And oh my God, what a thing that 6 months ago when we got electrically shut down, which is very unexpected. But here we are 6 months later. And thank you for all your work. And thanks to the Dance Palace too.
Carlos, you're muted. It looks like you're saying really good things. Wait. Carlos, you're still muted. Carlos. Rebecca's getting up. Here, let me spotlight you in the meantime, Carlos, but you're muted. I'm gonna see if I can. Where are you going? We've lost our curator.
He's replenishing his.
I didn't
There we go.
unmute. Oh my goodness.
Can you say
Actually,
it
all I
again?
was saying, all I was saying was that this was brought up again of how come we access the recording later. And I know you mentioned it, but it might be worthwhile to mention it again. And I don't really want to go away without actually saying to Ernesto, thank you so, so much for sharing with us your life as an artist. And it's fascinating to see what you have gone through as in your process. It's just totally fascinating because there's so much of the, like Rich was saying, there's so much of the psychic and so much of so many parts that have been building up in this incredible process that you have gone through and that you have developed into this human being that is really, we're happy to have you here. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Rich, you want to add anything? I'm asking Rich if he wants to add something because he's from the art committee and he's here. And so anyway.
Not tonight.
Not today, not necessary.
I would like to say I just scrolled through the who's watching. I'd like to thank everybody that came. I've seen a lot of friends and new friends and old friends, and it's really great. And I see someone wearing a mask, pig mask. It's great to see you there, Sierra. And so anyways, thank you all for showing up.
Yeah, I also want to jump in and respond to the recording question because it's a really good one. And I'm sure there are folks that didn't make it today but want to watch, or maybe they were here the whole time but want to watch again. So I shared in the chat how to access the recording. It's going to go up on our YouTube channel by tomorrow. And so you can sit and watch it. I also want to make a plug for Ernesto's amazing virtual gallery page. We put that together in April, and it's just amazing to be able to look up close at these pieces. If you're somewhere else and can't make it into the studio physically, or you could do both. So I've shared that also in the chat. Everyone will be receiving an email with all this information tomorrow, so no need to copy down all these links right now. But yeah, I put Ernesto's contact information. I would, if you haven't been into his studio, it's an amazing experience. The energy is incredible. It's just really impactful to be up close with these pieces. I've been working with him, putting these up virtually, and had no idea the scale, the size of some of these, and just the textures you get to see up close. So that's all in the chat, the information about that. Trying to think, am I missing anything? I guess, well, also it's been almost exactly 2 years since the art committee's first virtual reception. I've lost count of how many we've done, but I just wanted to say thank you, Ernesto, for marking these 2 years. It's been so cool to be here with all of you, and thank you to the art committee. Also, as a reminder, these talks have been free. We've been doing this for 2 years and they've all been free. If you feel inspired to donate to the Dance Palace, we really appreciate that. It makes us possible to do more stuff like this. Yeah.
And I want to add that in terms of the Dance Palace, we have opened again. We're already open. So there will be, the gallery will be up again. And there will be, actually in December, Sarah Killingworth is coming in to do some photography in there. And we're already working for the next year's different art months and who is going to be the artist. So you can now join us that way too. Eventually, there will be also a few more of this particular way of doing things with the Zoom, but we're going to be actually going into the Dance Palace and checking it out ourselves.
I do feel compelled to say something. I think that we have had 16 or 17 now of these virtual galleries. And what I am proud of as a member of the committee is that we've been able to present the art and the artist and the growth of the artist and the passion of the artist in a way that most of us have had our own gallery openings, and it's in a way that you can't get in a gallery opening. It's not, you can't talk to people, you can't get the depth of the artist. What Ernesto shared with us was not just from his heart, but from his soul, and the evolution of his awarenesses that just kept adding and adding and adding to this amazing psycho-emotional, transformative art. And you'll see more of it if you stay in touch with the Dance Palace and look for the galleries that we will be having coming up. And if you're really curious, you can go to the Dance Palace's YouTube channel, and you can find that at the Dance Palace, or maybe Laurel Ann can put that on there, and you can see all 16 of the artists blooming during these presentations. So please join us that way.
It's a library and it's open. Thank you so much. Laurel Ann, it's yours.
Oh, I think I've said everything I need to say. Ernesto, do you have anything else you want to say?
No, it's been really great, and thank you. I'm seeing so many lovely faces, and now that I'm not speaking, and thank you all, Stephen and Babs. It's great to see you both.
All right.
I
Well,
hope
thank
everyone
you
has a
so
good
much.
evening. Thank you, Ernesto. Thank you, Carlos. And Rich, too.
Thank you, Laurel Ann.
All right. Have a good night, everyone. Take care.
Take